Hi there. This is Steve Kaufman. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that relates to language, and it relates to education, but it's a little bit different from the straight language learning that I've been talking about. And it relates to what is known as critical thinking. And I have been on this email exchange listserv forum where people who are involved in ESL teaching and helping immigrants and so forth have been discussing what they call, I think there were several subjects. One was critical thinking, beginning ESL class. I think they were talking a little bit about the use of technology in the classroom. They just got into a lot of different subjects, but the critical thinking, I have the impression that people who teach language to immigrants or low literacy learners think that they are going to teach them how to think. And I have been struggling with this, and I just cannot see how you do that. I think that you can help people reason, you can help people. First of all, you have to help them improve their language. If they're going to speak intelligently in a language, they need a lot of words. So the first part of it, before you even worry about helping them learn how to think, to my mind, has to be to get them to acquire a lot of words. I mean, it depends what they're going to talk about. If they're going to talk about things that are very basic and simple, then they don't need a lot of words. But again, it depends on their goals. But I think words, getting some natural expressions in the language is number one. You shouldn't mess with their thinking at that stage. And then you can help people with some formulas for organizing their thoughts so that they become a little more persuasive. At least persuasive in terms of the culture of the language you're teaching, so that in the case of English, we would suggest to them that they express their views this way, that they support their arguments this way, because that's more persuasive to an English-speaking listener. I suppose if you were learning Spanish or Chinese, then there would be a different range of ways of expressing your views that are considered persuasive. And so you really learn how to apply some form of logic to justify the position that you have, because most people arrive at a position on a certain subjects based more on emotion than on logic. Few people sit back and sort of have a blank slate and say, now what do I really think about, whatever, global warming, starting from nothing, from no influence, from family, from anything, just like I'm going to deduce a position. That just doesn't happen. And the proof is that people, very well-educated people, at least in terms of book learning type of education, can have tremendously different views on something. So, which is a good thing. I mean, people should have different views. That means that they have all used logic to defend whatever position they arrived at. And the more logical you are, the better you are in using arguments and appearing to analyze and synthesize and investigate and observe and perhaps look at two sides of the coin. All of this makes you more persuasive. But if the idea, and I on this email exchange that I'm on, it's a lot of teachers, and they're all talking about wonderful projects that they've been on and encouraging their learners to be open-minded and question their role in society and who has power in society. And of course, really what they're doing is they're foisting their sort of activist agenda, whether it be women's issues or the power of the powerless or whatever. They're trying to kind of inculcate these activist views into their students who really only want to learn English, and the funding for these programs is for learning English, but these teachers don't find that stimulating enough, so they want to teach them to stand up for their human rights, however defined. But if it comes to a question of being open-minded and willing to really evaluate one's positions, I must say that I don't find educated people such as university people, maybe myself included, I don't find educated people any more open-minded than people with less education. I find that in many cases, the less educated people are more willing to listen. They have less, hard and fast views on things, so that for a number of things, they at least, perhaps they're more humble. They're prepared to listen. Many universities, certainly people who work at universities, or people like lawyers and people like that, they do not listen at all. Maybe I'm in the same category. I like to think that I listen, and I like to think that I apply some form of analysis to the arguments that are presented to me, but I'm sure that I'm actually quite wedded to my prejudices, and but not as badly as some. And when I think of some of the tremendously stupid things that university professors say at conferences on issues that I know something about, I don't think their powers of critical thinking are any better than anyone else's. So I don't think you can teach critical thinking. I think people think the way they do. They think more with their emotions, and some people have better skills at developing arguments to support the position that they've reached, largely emotionally. And the idea that you can teach critical thinking in a classroom, and in particular to beginning ESL people, I just think is a pipe dream. I think that, as you know, my view on language learning is all those beginning ESL students, learners, would be better off to have stories that they can listen to and read and listen to over and over again, and don't ask them in class, what is the reason that you left your little village as a refugee and came to North America, and who has power in the society here, and what is your role, and all of this kind of thing, asking them to question their role in society and why they came. They just want to learn English. So why don't you make it easy for them, give them pleasant stories. The more familiar the content is to them, the more enjoyable it is, the more likely they are to listen to it and to learn from it. The more I feel when you're learning, say, a language, the less you have to think, the less you're relying on logic, the better. The more you're catering to the enjoyment side of your brain, the better you're going to pick up the language. So teaching critical thinking, I just don't see it. But on this email exchange, it was all about, they quoted experts, and they had links to websites that were all social activist, women's issues, these kinds of things. I mean, if we're really serious about critical thinking, I would like to see the teacher who would talk to, say, a Somali woman or a woman from Afghanistan and say, okay, now let's apply critical thinking to Islam. Now, I don't want to pick on Islam, it could be any religion. But if you start to apply real critical thinking to religion, first of all, the person's not going to listen, because if they are religious, they're not interested in applying critical thinking to their religion. But there is no religious belief that would stand up to a genuine, objective, thorough, sort of critical analysis. Because what happens with the critical thinking is you start out with your belief. So once you've got the belief, that's kind of the ground floor, then you build all of these structures, logical or whatever, arguments, but they're all based on this foundation, which is your belief. So, in short, I do not believe you can teach critical thinking, and I think we should stay with the idea of teaching language skills, which is based around a lot of listening and reading and learning vocabulary and encouraging people to express themselves on whatever they please, and that we should not try to inculcate any kind of ideology or even any undoubtedly very culturally sensitive way of thinking or reasoning on people. They'll pick it up naturally as they learn the language if they find that helps them. So there you have it.